Just gonna wait for some people to show up. Alright guys, so as you guys can see, I'm back here in Jerusalem. I did a very short video with you guys on Thursday, but this is gonna be my first, I guess, what you would call full-length video. And the topic that I wanted to speak about tonight is a very, I would say it's very complex, but it's also very simple. In the end, it's very simple. Although the components are very complex, that's why I'm even having trouble, even at this moment, I guess, putting it all together in my head to make it into something that you guys will understand. But given everything that's going on in the world right now, you guys will, no matter how I formulate it, it'll probably be understood in some way, shape, or form. So, the lead question of the topic, what I call the thesis question, would be, how did we get to this point? How did we get here? What do you guys might be asking, what is here? Here is here is a place where there is no truth. You know, if you guys examine the political landscape today, the issue really isn't, you know, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, or even, you know, leftist or anything like that. The issue is the truth is not present. And if it is present, you know, there's one group of people that claims to have a monopoly on it, another group of people who has, let's say, a little bit more of it than the other group, but at the same time they're also missing certain things. And so, you know, anybody who tries to occupy the space of truth gets either shut out or put in a particular, you know, or shoved into one category or the other, or is canceled, or is put in like a particular box, or seen in a certain way, whatever it is. And I'll tell you guys something, you know, it used to be, at least in the Western world, you know, people, generally speaking, and I'm talking about, let's say, even, you know, secular society in America, or even like what you would call secular / we'll use / traditional society in Israel, more or less people followed, I'll say, I'm not going to use the term Judeo-Christian, I'm just going to say the word biblical, or maybe even Torah principles, or what I would call Old Testament, or what you would call, you know, 7 laws of Noah principles, right? They lived according to those principles. Even if people were not religious, or Shomer Shabbat, or Torah observant, or even, you know, like non-Jews, they weren't, you know, churchgoers, they followed more or less these principles. And so when you follow these principles, at least you have something, a mechanism that gives you kind of a moral compass, a moral benchmark and standard which to measure things by, which to live by, and also it kind of gives you the lens excuse me, it gives you like a lens to be able to see what is what's called absolute truth and what isn't. So there is none of that, or there was none of this, you know, your truth, everybody has to live your truth, you know. There was no, for the most part, the world did not live according to what's called moral relativism, and over certain over a certain amount of time, I guess we're talking like the 80s. Now it's our friends over here. 80s, 90s, and into the, you know, let's say the mid 90s, the late 90s, early 2000s. You had this thing of like people more and more were fading away, or swimming away from those core, I guess, societal principles and going into things like, or ideas where they would say, well, you don't necessarily need the Bible to give you a morality. You have this thing called secular humanism, where human beings intrinsically know not to kill, or intrinsically know not to do this, or intrinsically know not to do that. And so people just kind of became comfortable in this idea where we get our morality from, the mutual understanding, or the general understanding, or the assumed understanding of humanity, right? The Western world of humanity. And my friends, I'll tell you something. This was actually happening when I was in college. This is, you're talking like 15 years ago, to where even I kind of said, you know what? Okay, you don't want to be religious? You don't want to follow the Bible, the Torah, whatever it is. Even if you're Jewish, not Jewish, you don't want to follow these things, these principles. Okay, fine. So we have this understood general set of principles that all of humanity can agree on, more or less. Don't steal, don't kill, treat others, how you want to be treated, this and that. Okay. You don't necessarily need, this celestial, what Christopher Hitchens used to call celestial dictatorship to help you, to run your life, essentially, under which to live your life. And I'll tell you guys something, it was okay. For a little bit it was okay. And then at some point, I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was, maybe it was a combination of the media and Hollywood and movies and TV shows and this kind of zeitgeist of, at some point it became a thing of like anything goes, right? So if anything goes and we don't have God, we don't have Hashem, slowly, we don't have that standard anymore, right? In society, we don't have that standard. And then we get into a point of like, just anything goes. And so if anything goes, that means that people can now live not according to a set standard, or an absolute truth. They can live according to, their truth, as Oprah would say. Find your truth. I remember I had friends. This was back in the New York City club scene, and this is actually when I started seeing the stuff that you guys are seeing now with, like, all this stuff with wokeness and moral relativism and postmodernism. I actually was seeing that primarily on the left-wing side of the political spectrum. I remember friends that I had who what I would call on the fringe at that time. You're talking like 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005. And I remember I would like write something in a message board. I would say like, whatever happened to normalcy? And I remember like a couple of people would say like, but what do you mean by normal? What do you mean by normal? What you consider normal is what other people consider crazy. And I'm just like, oh boy. Okay. But then I was like, okay, you know what? Well, at least it's good that these people are on the fringe of society and not the mainstream. And my friends, lo and behold, 14, 15 years later, where this is the mainstream. But the question is, how did we get to that place? How did we get there? My friends, and the thing is, I have people asking me, like my mother just chimed in here, and she used to ask me, Greg, how did we didn't have God in the Soviet Union. We didn't have religion. It was illegal. It was outlawed, right? How do we know right from wrong? The thing is, the Soviet Union, for all of its stuff, for all of its crap, pardon my French, they had certain standards of, I guess, moral understanding. Also, what they would do is they would take people like, for example, transgender and gay and all these kind of people, and they would basically say these people are kind of the dregs of society. They're a little bit sick in the head, and we're just going to take them and we're going to, we're going to marginalize them, we're going to ostracize them, and we're going to send them to the mental hospital. So this is actually a separate conversation I want to get into with you guys. There's kind of these three, and I think Jordan Peterson mentioned this. There's this kind of unholy alliance today between like, the transgender movement, and then you have the Marxists, and then you have the Islamists, and the question is who's going to eat who first, right? That's a separate conversation. So, at least in the place like the Soviet Union, you had kind of this understanding of like what morality and normalcy was. Because at the end of the day, they wanted that actually came from a desire to have order, right? Because they knew that if they let all these things run amok, they wouldn't have any order. So that's where that came from. So you instead of having a, what's called, what I said was a celestial dictatorship, you just had an actual dictatorship, a human dictatorship, right? So yeah. So how did we get to the point? We got to the point where when you slowly erode the values that come from Hashem, that come from Torah, that come from the Bible, you get into the situation where you basically lose your moral compass, you lose your standards, and people lose sight of what emes actually is, what truth, absolute truth actually is, that there is such a thing as absolute truth. How do we know that? Because now they're talking about that 2 + 2 = 4, just that fact is racist. Why is it racist? Because modern mathematics was developed and created by white men, whether it was white men in antiquity or white men in, during the Enlightenment era in Europe, and therefore anything that's made and owned by European white straight men or European white men is by definition racist and the worst thing ever, and should be, at least, reinvented, looked at again and reimagined and what have you. My friends, I mean, this is where we're at. We're at the point where math is not math, where the basic tenets of mathematics are like they don't exist. There are some people that are coming and saying that these things are not a fact, and this is where we're at. So now you may ask yourself, well, how do you know what's truth and what's not? Well, my friends, you can tell today what's truth and what isn't by the people who are espousing the antithesis of that, or what I just mentioned to you, the people who are basically venturing into those places and claiming that they have the ultimate, the greatest idea since sliced bread, which is all of these things that are antithetical to Torah, and basically what God is not in favor of. And these are the people that, if somebody's going against them and saying and coming and saying, well, your ideology is whack, or your ideology is false, or here's what's wrong with your ideology, and they have an opinion and they bring proofs why that is, irrespective of even like spirituality or the Torah, these people, the people who do this, get canceled by the other group. What does that mean? It means that the other group intrinsically knows, the group that's pushing these ideas intrinsically knows that their ideas do not stem from truth and emes, but they're afraid that they're going to be rejected, and they have no other recourse but to cancel the group and to ostracize the group and make the, paint the group evil, the group that's going against them. So now you guys may say, well, what about the rights of this particular group? What about transgender rights and gay rights and all these things? So now, my friends, we get into a discussion of the concepts of approval versus acceptance. This is where why the Western world is collapsing, because people are conflating these two concepts, the concepts of approval and acceptance. If you come to me and you tell me, I believe in such and such value, and then I tell you, well, this is totally, you're totally fine to believe in those things, you're totally fine to hold by those values, you're totally fine to support this group. I accept you as a person, as a human being. I accept these people. I'm not going to kill them. I'm not going to hang them from a tree. I'm not going to put them in jail. I'm not going to put them to do what the Soviet Union did to them, was to put them in mental hospital, what's called psikhushka. But I will tell you, based on the beliefs that I hold by, which is the Torah, I don't necessarily approve of it. So these people will come and say, wait a minute, you don't approve of me? How dare you? Cancelled. No, I didn't say I don't approve of you. I said I don't accept. I'm sorry, I don't say I don't accept you. I say I don't approve. I accept you as a person. I think you should live on this earth. I think you should be able to breathe the same oxygen that I breathe. But I don't approve of your behavior. Or I don't approve of you pushing this ideology on, the general population of society. To where little kids have to watch you reading books to them and dressed up in drag. You know what I'm saying? Again, like, approval versus acceptance. So now, my friends, we have a situation where these people that are coming and saying they have their values, and this is again a very popular discussion now. They're coming and they're forcing other people to say certain things, or they're muzzling other people. It's gotten now to a point where there are people on the left-wing side of the political spectrum who signed a letter that was penned in one of the most like left-wing magazines that exist, called Harper's Magazine. You're talking about people like Noam Chomsky, who hates Israel, who would be like an ally with these people, on the campuses. You're talking about people like Salman Rushdie, who's an atheist, who doesn't even believe in Torah or the Bible or anything like that. You're talking about like J.K. Rowling, who they just canceled, who said, "Yeah, I support transgender people, but you know what? There is such a thing as gender. That's her opinion. That's her, and she posits, this is hurting women because if you're coming into a bathroom with women, and you're a man, but you can have men that are pretending that they're women, that are actually not actually transgender. And now you're putting women in danger." And she posited that idea, that very idea, which you can argue on. Yes, no, maybe so. Yes, I don't know. Let's have a conversation about it. No conversation. Ugh, cancel. Ladies and gentlemen, this is you know what this is? Do you know what this is? This is a cult. When you come to people and you have another idea contrary to what they believe, and you prove it, or you try to prove it, and you want to have a discussion with them, and they'll have no discussion with you, and they cancel you, they don't even have a discussion, and they assume that you are, blowing a dog whistle automatically, that's called a cult, my friends. That is called a cult. Even I, the Baal Tshuva Jew, who, grew up secular and, whatever you want to say, saw the light, people come to challenge my ideas, I'm happy to debate with them all day. I'm not going to cancel them. I'm not going to, unless they just come and like make fun of me and like ridicule me, that's a different story, right? But if you're coming and you want to challenge, you want to have a debate with me about the Torah, the validity of Hashem, the validity of, if God is real, or if the Torah is real, if it's a divinely written document, or this or that, let's have at it, my friends. This is a marketplace of ideas. This is a marketplace of minds, a meeting of the minds. If you're the biggest atheist on the planet, I'm happy to debate with you, but I'm not going to cancel you and call you, a heretic, a kuffar, or a koifer, or whatever you call it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is cult. And I know people like this in religious Jews as well. And I know people who behave like this, and I tell them that they're behaving like a cult member. I'll tell them to their face. Again, I speak as a person who grew up not religious, became religious, also has a certain fervor, certain element of fervor. My family who's watching knows this, but at the same time, I'll debate you all day. I'm not going to cancel you. This is how we operate. But my friends, now we have a situation where people are on campuses, and it's literally they gave it a name. People who see what's going on have given it a name. People on the left-wing side of the political spectrum have given this a name. It's called the Church of Woke. It is a dogma. It is an ideology. It is a thing that blinds people. And my friends, you want to say that Trump is at fault here. My friends, this started, I'm telling you again, this started when I was in the club scene in New York, and it really came alive during the Obama era, when these people were given carte blanche on campuses, and their ideologies were validated and given just free reign. And anybody who goes against them, if you guys saw what happened in Evergreen State College to this guy, Brett Weinstein, no relation to Harvey Weinstein, this professor, they made a day where there's no white people on campus, white professors, or something like that, and they asked him to leave the campus. He's like, no, I'm not leaving campus. What the hell is this? If you guys want to have a conversation, let's have a conversation. They harassed the guy. They basically physically harassed him. They brought baseball bats, and he basically eventually, he ended up resigning. And then now you guys could see him on Joe Rogan. This is, my friends, this is where we're at. But the point is, it all stems from one place. It all stems from when a society cannot see emes, when it cannot see the truth, and when a society ventures into something called post-modernism, moral relativism, and actually into what's called not necessarily even economic Marxism, which thank God we're not there, and I think even the liberals are trying to stop everything, anyone who's trying to bring us there, which is, you're talking about people like Bernie Sanders, whom even CNN ridiculed for his, economic policies, and what's her name, Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, and Ilhan Omar, and all these other people. We're not there yet, but we are at cultural Marxism. So now, my friends, I ask a question, and this is kind of a humorous, but actually a real question. You have these three groups. You have the transgender, you have the Marxist, and you have the Islamists. And they're all basically, if you go to any campus today in America, they're all basically on the same side, these three groups, right? And they're all, the Marxists are using the transgender, and the Islamists are using everybody. So the question is, who's going to get eaten? Who is going to remain standing? Who's going to eat everybody else, the other two groups? Which one of these two groups is going to eat the other two? I'll tell you guys something. I'll give you the answer. Very simple. This is where we get to the simple part. As I mentioned before, the Soviet Union used to treat transgender, gay, and all these other groups, these 70 genders that we have today, they used to treat them as marginalized beings. Why? Because Marxism at its core requires, and we see this today, requires what? It requires order. It requires that people cannot go against it. People cannot exercise their free speech against this ideology, this cult, right? At least cultural Marxism. So eventually, with the Marxists, you're going to have somebody rise up that is going to have to bring this group to order. Maybe somebody who doesn't even necessarily believe in this nonsense, right? And part of that order is going to be getting rid of people like the gays and transgender and any undesirables, including the Jews and all these kind of people. Or let's say religion, not just Jews. You're talking about evangelical, all that kind of stuff. And the thing is, what they're going to try to do is, in their quest, they're going to try to get rid of Islam as well. And Islam is going to say, wait a minute, excuse me, excuse you, you guys are infidels. You guys don't believe in God. And you transgender, you gays, you this, you guys go against the Quran. You guys are freaks. And the Islamists, pardon, I'm not going to use the term Muslim, I'm going to say Islamists, the fundamentalist Muslims, are going to eat both of those groups. If the transgenders and the gays don't get eaten by the Marxists via the order, or as Stalin liked to call it, the bread and order, then the Islamists are going to eat both those groups, and then we're going to have a fun time, my friends. And then you don't want to know what's going to be with America and the Western world, my friends. We already see it happening in Europe, where this movement, the Islamist movement, is kind of using these kind of moral relativist and postmodernist rights against Europe, to the point where Europe is collapsing. And now that you see the backlash in Europe to this, which is what? The rise of the right-wing movements in Europe, the rise of the nationalist movements. You're talking about places like Austria. Actually, today I just saw they elected a new president in Poland, who's like a pro-Trump, person. Austria, places like Austria. Now you're gonna see places like I think France. They haven't done it yet. Mostly Eastern Europe. I think England, obviously Boris Johnson. You see this stuff coming out now. Greece, right? There's a backlash to this stuff because they see they're losing their continent. Why? Because they've given it away to moral relativism and postmodernism, and the void has been filled by Islam, and now there's a backlash. And now the same thing is about to happen in America. And again, these little kids on campuses, if you're watching, or you have kids on campuses, your kids are going to be eaten alive. The kids who are marching for gay and transgender, all these wonderful things, are going to be eaten alive by the people who think that all this stuff is freak stuff. And I'll tell you guys something, it's not going to be the Orthodox Jews, because at the end of the day, I'll be honest with you guys, we Orthodox Jews, we may not approve of this stuff, but we accept it. How do we know we accept it? Because there are segments of the modern Orthodox Jews, and even in Lubavitch circles, that accept people in their community who are gay and transgender. People can breathe, like I said at the top of this program, people can breathe the same air as we breathe. We may not approve, but we accept. But I'll tell you guys something, Islam does not approve nor accept. They do not accept, they will not accept this. They will not accept you. You cannot breathe the same air as they breathe. They will throw you off a rooftop. And we've seen it. We've seen it with Sunnis with ISIS, we've seen it in Iran with Shiites. It doesn't matter, my friends. Okay? The crocodile will eat you first and last, simultaneously. Okay? That's where we're at, my friends. That's how we got to this point. Again, when the Western world loses emes, loses the truth, anything goes, but then there's a certain entity called Islam, called fundamentalist Islam, that has to fill that void, right? Because at the end of the day, they're coming and saying, well, we have the ultimate truth. Just like Linda Sarsour was at the Women's March and said, Islam is here to bring you, women's liberation. How? With modesty. How? With the hijab and the niqab. We're here to bring you women's lib. My friends, I want to see some of these women who were walking in the Women's March with vaginas on their heads and something called a slut walk. I want to see them put on a niqab and a hijab like some of the neighbors, my neighbors' wives and daughters and sisters. Okay, I want to see this, my friends. You guys must be kidding. You guys must be kidding. Ain't happening. I'm sorry. So, my friends, at some point, the Western world is going to have to choose. Are they going to choose go back to Emet, to the truth? Are they going to come back to Hashem any which way? Whether it's the Jewish people coming back to God, to Torah, whether it's non-Jews coming back to some sort of belief in God, maybe 7 Noahide laws, whatever. Not necessarily Christianity. They're going to have to choose. And if they don't do that, and if they stay with this kind of nebulous moral, relativism, or maybe even secular humanism, I'll tell you guys something. It's going to leave a giant void, and that void is going to be filled by the fastest growing religion on the planet Earth, which is Islam. It's not going to be Judaism, my friends. We see that now. There's only 15 million of us on this planet. It's going to be filled by Islam. It's already starting. It's already happening in Europe. People are converting. America's almost there, my friends. America's almost there. So, you're either going to choose emes, the ultimate truth, or truth will find you, but it's going to find you in a very, very draconian and non-accepting way. In a throw you off a rooftop kind of way. And it ain't going to be me, my friends. I'm just this poor old, well, not poor, but I'm just this little old Orthodox Jew just trying to make his way in the world, and I don't care what you do, just as long as you don't muzzle me. If I'm giving you my opinion and I can prove to you that your ideology is whack, and you shut my mouth, you're part of a cult. And your cult does not have a monopoly on truth. The only thing that has a monopoly on truth is the Torah and Hashem. That's it, guys. Alright. Talk to you guys soon.